Hi, it's Dr. Mercola, and I've got some very important information for you about the water that you drink. Now, fortunately, most everyone viewing this lives in a developed country like the United States, and our water getting sick from a water supply is very low risk. I just recently got back from India, where that's not the case, and certainly Mexico also falls in that category. So the way that we are able to achieve this protection from infectious agents is a potential complication and potentially serious concern for you that I want to explain in more details that you're probably not aware of. And that is that they achieve this protection by adding chlorine to the water supply, and that chlorine causes some potentially dangerous concerns for you. It's specifically, when you add chlorine to the water, it combines with organic material that's already dissolved in the water. This is typically water supplies that are obtained from surface sources like lakes and rivers. So this dissolved organics, when you add the chlorine to it, it reacts pretty violently to form what's called a disinfection byproduct, or a DPB. And an example of those would be a THM, or trihalomethane, and an HAA, which is a halogenated acetic acid. So these materials are in the water, and they're actually far more toxic than the chlorine. So that's one of the reasons why you want to be really careful about the source of water and how you're providing it to your family. Now, fortunately, one of the ways that you can eliminate this from your drinking water is, well, there's two primary ways. One is to get high quality bottled water. Now, you probably know from reading the site that I'm not a big fan of bottled water for a number of reasons. One is the energy cost associated with transporting the water, and of course the plastic pollution that is just pervasive in our culture. So I strongly recommend and discourage regular use of bottled water. It's not a great choice. So then the other one is to use filtered water. And if you're going to use a filter, the best quality filters are typically the reverse osmosis filters, because not only will they remove most all of these disinfectants and byproducts, but they'll also remove chlorine. And if you have a water softener, they'll remove most of the salt or the water softening material that you're using, and they remove fluoride. And fluoride, as you know, is a poison, a toxin that I and many other experts believe should not be in the water. And if that surprises you, just type that fluoride on my site and you'll find more details that go into that more carefully. But for this discussion, it's important to know that these disinfectant byproducts are thousands of times, literally thousands of times more toxic than chlorine, which is relatively benign and inert over time. So there are some simple ways that you can identify your water supply, because if they're in your water supply, because your water supplier, unless you're on a well, when you are your own water supplier, of course, but your water supplier, if you're purchasing your water, is required by law to do a regular analysis. And you can look for these disinfection byproducts in there. You typically want to look for the THM, or trihalomethanes, and you want it to certainly be below 100 parts per billion. And if it's between 50 and 100, which is the allowable range, it's somewhat dangerous, and clearly the newer standards are going lower. So ideally, you'd like to be below 50, and ideally below 10. The best level of this, of course, is 0. And one of the ways that municipal water supplies reduce this is they tend to filter the water before they add the chlorine, because if they can get these dissolved organic materials out of the water, then the chlorine has nothing to react and it won't form these things. So this is information, I said, that's freely available from your purveyor of your water, the company that sells you the water. Now, if in fact you identify that you have a high source, it's really important to know, because the drinking water that you're consuming is only a small fraction of these disinfectant byproducts you're exposed to, because most people are going to be exposed to it from their bathing. That may seem surprising, but there are some studies that suggest that your exposure to these products are going to be, you'd have to drink this water for a week to get the exposure that you would from one shower, potentially. And the reason is that for a number of reasons, is that you have an increased exposure because you're using simply more water. And rather than drinking a half a gallon or a gallon of water today at most, you're going to be exposed to 10, 20 gallons of the water. And additionally, the water is going to be volatilized. It's going into a vapor. You're breathing it into your lungs, which has a massive surface area, and you're also getting exposure through your skin. So they have two different routes of entry when you're showering and bathing. So that's why it's so key. So it's important to know and understand this. Now, so of course you should use a high quality filter, reverse osmosis filter, to get them out of your drinking supply. But if there really aren't a lot of great options for the bathing. So One of the things you can do, though, is that you can adjust your shower or your bathing so that you can reduce the temperature, because the higher the temperature, the more these are going to volatilize. But you can also reduce the time. So rather than using 10, 20, 30, 40 gallons of water, you can use a few gallons of water. And that's going to be another important strategy. Now, additionally, you can use a shower filter, and shower filters are, high quality ones at least, are very effective at removing virtually all of the chlorine from the water that you're going to bathe in. And the chlorine can be responsible for the smell and the odor that you're experiencing, but also for some sensitivities and dry skin. So they're very effective at reducing this. Unfortunately, they are less effective at removing these disinfection byproducts, because you would require a very large filtration media and pretty much a whole house filter, or what they call a POE, or a point of entry filter, to remove these effectively. And in fact, at this point in time, to the best of our knowledge, there are no certified systems that exist commercially that do this effectively. We're actually working with a company in developmental process and stage at this point to manufacture one. But at this point, one doesn't exist. So the next best thing you can do is use a high-quality shower filter that will remove some of these chlorines and will lower somewhat these disinfection byproducts. But it is a real issue. It's an issue that most people aren't aware of. It was virtually unknown 10, 20 years ago, but it's a real challenge to the water. And when you lower these things, there's probably so many other things in the water supply that's an issue too. Ones we didn't even talk about were the drugs in the water, but that people take, because the average person is taking 13 prescriptions a year. They urinate those out, and they go into the water supply, and they get recycled, and no one's even looking at these things. So, I mean, we just learned about the disinfection byproducts in the last 10, 20 years, and in the next 10 or 20, we'll probably have the methodologies and technology to analyze these drugs. But essentially, there are things in the water that you just do not want to expose yourself, especially over a long time. So the key thing is if you have these technologies like reverse osmosis filters and some type of shower filter system for your bathing, you're going to limit that quite dramatically. So hopefully this information was helpful, because like most things in life, it's paying attention to details, and drinking water is one of the most common things we do. So I'm hopeful that this information will help you and your family take better control of your health.